Daniel.
Hello?
How would you define, if I asked you, what socialism is?
Socialism is the fatigue from a market which guarantees that work be rewarded, depending on what consumers deem to be worth it. There is then a bias in the market, which is propagated by the motivations and tendencies of consumers. Therefore, those which fall at least worth in a society do not receive the same rewards as those who fall at most worth. This then creates a resentment, which is the foundation of the Marxist socialist ideology.
Nice. And that was your quote. So thank you very much for that. I'm excited for your book when that's coming out. You can let people know. All right, everyone. Welcome to the Essential Libertarians. I'm your host, Kareem, giving you the tools for self-governance. So before we get started, if you want to keep the Ron Paul revolution going, the decentralized revolution, the ideals of Murray Rothbard, head to the Mises Caucus at lpmisescaucus.com. We can find our resources, learn about us. Our stance is simple. Put freedom first. No more wars, no more lockdowns, no more bailouts, no more mandates. As an individual, you can decide what's best for you based on voluntary, decentralized interactions. So head over to lpmisescaucus.com. So a lot of stuff's been going on with the airlines. I've had speculation, but then there's articles here. People are saying this. I've heard different things, like at first, oh, they're going to do this, then they're not going to do this, and it gets confusing. So I said, what does the CEO say? Because that's the dude who's going to decide, right? So what's going on at PolitiFact here? I don't usually go to them for news, but I like this article. Southwest Airlines announced they will no longer terminate employees over the mandate. They have a truth meter here. But what did the CEO say? Basically, they announced on October 14th it would follow the federal directives saying that employees need to do it until that December 8th deadline. Then, October 12th, the CEO said in a television interview, the airline won't fire employees over the mandate, said they'll help workers getting an accommodation such as a religious or medical exemption. Also, now employees that were doing this hopefully are going to be off the hook, because as far as I'm concerned, if you take a look into what is involved in this medical procedure or any medical procedure, if you live in a free country, you should be allowed to get a religious exemption because you have freedom of religion. Even that, it even works for a constitutionalist argument. I'm not even going ANCAP here. Or a medical disability or something. Your doctor says don't do it, you don't do it. I don't think that has to be rocket science. So but PolitiFact saying something different. They're saying most major airlines in the United States are requiring employees to get this medical procedure and follow what Biden wants. And many airlines are considering that federal contractors in Southwest has worked with the government to, do military, to do stuff like that. So in conclusion, I think there's stuff that's up and down. I'm not quite sure where they're standing because I feel they're kind of going back and forth. But at least the CEO said we're not going to fire any employees over this, urging all of our employees to do it. But if they can't do it, we're looking for them to get a religious exemption. So, and there's also this YouTube video. But just what I'm going to throw this to you is, what do you think about I agree with the CEO's stance for the most part. I would even take it one step further and say, hey, I'm just going to leave it up to you. You don't even need a medical exemption. Or do you think he's maybe doing the right thing, saying, all right, fine, get a medical or religious exemption and then do it?
So, from my point of view, I would say that there should be no mandate. Therefore, there should be no exemptions. Therefore, unless you're simply stating that you have the choice to do what you want, get the vaccine, don't get the vaccine, you're religious, not religious, then immediately, if it's not that, then it's on immoral and unethical grounds. And I would say that it's obvious to me, I'm not sure if you've seen this, but there's definitely a storm of brewing in Southwest Airlines, right? Massive, some people say unorganized, some people say organized. It's really hard to get sort of like journalism and writing on that, whether it's organized sick outs, but there's a large majority of people who are not coming to work. You could even say it's not for the vaccine, but it is kind of quite peculiar how you have the largest amount of people who have made sick outs and not shown up to work in over 10 years. And it's all happening at once, and it happens after the mandate. So it does seem to be that the facts are pointing to maybe unorganized. Maybe they're not saying let's all do this, but they're all simply doing it, and they're doing it sort of in unison. But the point is that I think at the end of the day, when corporations begin to implement tyrannical policies of the government, and when that happens the other way around, and when corporation and the government act together to satisfy their own self-interest, what we have is a Mussolini-style fascism, right? Which I talked about this before.
And he's always quoted that. What is the big Mussolini quote that everybody goes? Fascism could more be called corporatism because it's the merger of corporate and state power. I think it goes like something like that. I'm not spread on that verbatim, but that's exactly what I'm seeing here. But the nice thing is, even though Southwest cooperates with the government, I think the CEO had some sense to say, hey, look, whether or not you want a medical procedure, it's not even about that. But if you don't want to get it, just do the medical procedure, do the religious exemption, call it a day. I think most people should be doing that with their employees, if not just saying, hey, it's up to you. I watch it. I'm not just going to do something because the federal government said. What does the federal government know about business? They don't even know how to balance a checkbook.
Yeah.
So maybe if someone can't balance a checkbook, you don't need to take business advice from them. I'm not an expert. I'm not Warren Buffett, but that's my inclination. So I just want to hit on that. A lot of people are talking about that. So let's go to California. Governor Newsom took this procedure. And then he disappeared for a while. And then a lot of people are saying that's made up. The governor said during a speech that the vaccine clinic was asked to comment on an article that he had a bad reaction within a few days, and that's why he bailed on the event. They're saying that's made up. It had no impact whatsoever, no fatigue, no soreness. He said that everything's working. And his comments to reporters came a day after he said that he had skipped the climate change conference to Scotland to spend more time with his family for Halloween. Until yesterday, he had not appeared at a public event as governor since getting his booster procedure, which he was active on social media and attended a soccer tournament on the Halloween weekend. And then he spent the weekend working at the Capitol and got a lot of good work done, he said on Wednesday. My question is this. I don't believe this. I kind of feel I pull this article. Actually, I usually pull articles because I like them. This article I actually pulled because I don't believe what he's saying. I actually believe something did happen. I heard different stories about what happened, like he wasn't feeling good or this or something else, or he something with his face. I don't know. I don't honestly know because I don't live in California. People in California were telling me this. But I have a sneaking suspicion something did happen. Maybe he did want to spend time. I'm not saying he didn't even want to spend time with his family. I'm not, if you're understanding what I'm saying. Maybe that's partially true. Maybe he did want to spend time with his family and do all this stuff. But I think something did happen, and he's not saying that. Kind of like he kept hyping. It's like you hype something up. Like, oh, Comcast is the best thing ever. I love it. And then internet starts going out. But like maybe they paid you or you're exec there, you work there. So no matter what, you have to defend what you put your all your currency, your reputation behind. So no matter how bad something happened, he's like, well, no, I'm fine. I'm doing good. Just need to take some time off with the family. You think I'm being hyperbolic here? Do you think something happened and that's partially true? You want to spend? I'm actually not sure. I don't believe this article.
Yeah. Well, if I may, I would like to share something with you on my screen because it goes in pretty well with what you're saying. So it's pretty funny. So here we go. So I don't know if you can see this, but this is from Snopes, and this was a few hours ago. And basically, the headline of the Snopes is, "No, Gavin Newsom isn't missing. Everybody be cool." And then underneath it says claim California Governor Gavin Newsom suddenly went missing in early November 2021, rating false. Now here's what's weird about this.
Yeah,
it's all. I don't even have to read the rest, right? We can read the rest if you really want to. But I'm almost positive what they're going to use to sort of justify the rating as false is the fact that he wasn't missing. He had let people know he was leaving for his family, right? So again, you know how they do with play those semantic games and try and fact check something that's not even what the technical claim is, right? Missing in the sense that he was not in the public eye for an extended period of time, and he said that he was doing something, but it seems very fishy. And the reason why I say it's very fishy is that Newsom did say he was, part of the reason why he didn't attend the climate summit was because he went trick-or-treating. Now, the reason why I find that hard to believe isn't because some people would do that. It's because Gavin Newsom, how many times have you seen him miss a climate meeting? He rarely does he miss anything, right? He's a psychopath, and I can get into why I can tell you he's a psychopath. Like, I'm not joking. Like Bill Gates, that's a different one. That's a more complicated case. But given all the empirical evidence I have, I can give you many reasons as to why I can almost objectively, definitely empirically say he's a psychopath. He exhibits all the traits of a psychopath in many ways. Anyways, the point is when does he really care about his family other than when he props them up for a political campaign? When does he really show that he loves his kids and children and whatnot? And again, there's a pattern of behavior. When there's a pattern of behavior that is consistent through a pretty decent amount of time, and then there's a break in that pattern, you have to ask yourself, why is there a break in that pattern? And does that break in that pattern match something that has happened and some other breaks in that pattern, right? Because you take a drug addict, for instance, to say a heroin addict, right? So if there's a pattern of behavior that he does heroin, let's just say on Thursday for 6 years, right? And there's been a few times where he didn't do heroin because he was in jail or sick and he couldn't, right? Let's just say he was in jail. Well, that might be the case more so in the future as well. Like, how many times did he not do heroin because he simply quit? You see what I'm saying? Yeah. That's not consistent with the other breaks and behavior patterns, right? We do this with children all the time, especially clinical psychologists. The point is that if you think that he missed a climate summit, which he's never missed ever, like he was going to climate summits before he even was governor, with Obama, which I find that highly unlikely because that he could have went there with Obama and it could have been good for him. He is facing re-election soon, not that soon, but coming up. So I think it's unlikely that he simply didn't go to the climate summit because he was trick-or-treating. That's what I find hard to believe. Now, what was the real reason why he didn't go? Well, I'm not entirely sure.
I don't know.
And he did say that the reports that COVID booster made him sick were missigos or whatever he said, something like that.
Yeah, said it's fake or that's
yeah.
Here's the hard
I don't know, but I can say it does seem like the pattern of behavior that has been consistent throughout a period of time broke in a not so consistent fashion, and he never misses these climate meetings. And I think he's too much of a psychopath to really care about his children to miss that, because he cares more about his public perception.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's to me what a lot of these powerful politicians care about. The one thing they care about more to me than anything is I want power. I want control over this, whatever it is. I mean, that's just how they are. They can't really show emotion. They don't really care. If they have to, it's kind of like, okay, well, let me put on a happy face and pretend to be a public servant and all that. But as to quote the one thing of the 2016 campaign, you can have a public and private position. The private position is it's kind of like Darth Sidious. They put on a nice face, but then behind it is something quite insane. Now, I also agree with you. If you're coming from his political side of the field, you want to be at these climate meetings because that's his big thing. His big thing is, that the world is going to, have this huge calamity and we got to prepare and we got 10 years or whatever. And there's too much CO2 and all that stuff, never mind even that they have tons of planes there and they have huge jets and, all these Prince Andrews, lecturing people about carbon footprint, has the biggest plane there. And then they all have huge planes and they're lecturing people about climate change. I don't know. It doesn't add up, but he would have been there. It's kind of like Mike Lindell missing like a Trump rally and Trump's right there, or me like Kareem. Dave Smith was in Latrobe. Oh, I'm just busy. You'd think something's up. Like, is Kareem sick? Is something happened? Is he upset? Is there something going on? So I'm not saying what's what here. Most stories I can be like, okay, I'm gonna put my opinion down and here's what it is and point to this, this, and this, and come to a different conclusion. I'm not even come to a conclusion here. I'm just saying it's fishy, it's weird. But these people do not stick to one thing. They play around, they shift words around.
Yeah, they're hypocrites. They're absolutely hypocrites, man.
Yes. So let's talk about someone who's not. There's a lot of people in politics I don't like, even when they're doing the right thing. And the reason I don't like them is because they take a stance, some like the Mumford and Sons guy. Someone says something mean, or someone says something like, oh, I don't like you, on the left or the right. It happens both. And then they back down. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. My bad. Or they take a stance and then the right, the right loves me now. Woo. Or the left doesn't like me, or vice versa. I think if I would pick, and I'm not a big celebrity sports, dude who's like follow their every move, listen to everything they say, they're right about everything, making them icons. I said it was kind of funny that the right was championing Nicki Minaj of all people, because if you ask her opinion on anything, I bet you she was like, well, I agree with universal health care. I agree with Bernie Sanders politics.
But she spoke out against mandates, which now is enough to simply get support from everyone in the right simultaneously, regardless of if everything else comes in conflict with their views. So what you're saying is true, and it goes to show you how much we went from a policy debate to a more of a debate on tyranny or not tyranny.
Yes.
Mandate or not mandate, more state or not more state, more overreach or not more overreach, right? So when even Nicki Minaj comes out and says something as, well, I'm not sure about this vaccine. There's not a lot of data going on, and there's some people who are getting sick, and I don't like it how the corporate press and the White House is trying to shove it down my throat. And you get everyone from the right championing her and everyone from the left hating her. So that right there shows you that there's an extreme disparity and sort of exaggeration in the political scene right now, where you could say one thing, as long as that one thing is anti-establishment, anti-tyranny, the right will simultaneously champion you, because that's what it's about now. It's not about whether you want universal health care or single payer or not a single payer. It's about whether you're going to put up and you're going to go along with this tyranny and with these unconstitutional mandates. Yeah.
And I'll bet you even, I'd be willing to bet that you could come out and say every Bernie Sanders economic talking point, be against mandates, be against tyranny, be against and you might get elected, even in a red plate, because they're like, well, okay, fine, 75% tax, but they're against what's being, they'll let me have school choice, they'll let me have bodily autonomy. We can figure it out. But all that aside, I did like particularly what Aaron Rodgers said, because he said, like, the left's going to cancel me, the right's going to champion me.
That's what I was going to read. That's the quote that I was just about to read. I had found it.
Go ahead. Actually, I don't want to steal your thunder.
But the quote's simply this. This is from Aaron Rodgers. The right's going to champion me. The left is going to cancel me. I don't give a. Can I swear?
Yeah.
Okay. I don't give a shit about either of them. Politics is a total sham. I'm not going on Fox News, just like I'm not going to go on CNN.
Yeah. And to me, that's actually the perfect stance, because I notice a lot of people, once one side gravitates to them, they're like, oh my God, like, okay, I'm going to go all the way here. or all the way here. And to me, it feels very inauthentic. Um, it feels like a lot of people like just kind of gravitate to where, oh, I'm on these big news stations now. I want to say the right thing here, say the right thing here, say the right thing here. Kind of like do the popular phrase, whatever it is. I'm going to say the right phrase, the popular phrase, and then go back and forth. I've seen that a lot. Now, a lot of people don't do that publicly, but when I actually talk to them, they're like, well, maybe I don't believe this so much. And then I see what people put on the internet and how they act. Generally, I've seen a huge divide. But with Aaron Rodgers, he seems consistent. I watched his little interview on the Pat McAfee show, and I thought the interview was reasonable. It's not anything crazy. But I think it's worth a watch if you like Pat McAfee and you like that.
Yeah. And the thing is with Pat McAfee is like one of the great things, and this is sort of off topic, but it's gonna be really short here, is that another example of why the mainstream media is failing, because you have this single guy who is taking on ESPN's numbers as far as their actual legitimate shows. When there's football on, of course, he doesn't beat Monday or Sunday Night Football. But on certain ESPN shows, he's beating some of their ratings. And he's a single guy. And believe it or not, it's going to be sad for you to hear this, but ESPN is dominated by it's basically it's a football version of CNN. It's an MSNBC and all those, very liberal. You had this news reporter for ESPN that spoke out and said she didn't want to get the vaccine because she didn't want to be mandated into doing something that she doesn't feel confident in. Boom, fired. And you know who picked her right up? Sure enough, the Daily Wire.
Yep. So, and that's the thing. I'm not even huge on the Daily Wire either or any of those things. I just say, look, if you give people choice, if you give people freedom, they will make the best choices. And that's why, instead of just saying and forcing them to do so, he did an interview. Basically, he said, I understand people are suffering. This has been a difficult time the last 2 years on so many people. I think we all know individuals who have lost their lives personally. People have lost their businesses, livelihoods. The way of life has been altered completely. And I emphasize on those things. And also, I know how sports can be a connector and bring people in times of adversity. And I do realize that I'm a role model to a lot of people. And the thing I like that he said is, anyone who felt misled by these comments, I take full responsibility for these comments, which to me, I'm like, oh my God, someone is taking full responsibility for it. To me, that's huge. And especially the time we're living in. Most people I've seen, like, if you're familiar with Mumford and Sons, I like some of their music. He congratulated, I think, Andy No on a book. I don't know if he even read it. And then someone from the far left said, oh, how dare you? Or you've seen this a million times. 50 Cent says, I can't vote for these crazy tax policies. And then someone comes out and says, no, you're not allowed to think like that. You're a Hollywood celebrity. You're this, you're that. Oh, okay. I changed my stance. I agree. It's just a lot of peer pressure. And then people are, they're like, hey, I was wrong to speak up. I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I see that a lot.
Well, I think it's very smart on the part of the Democrats and the liberal, and I would just say the establishment that sort of involves both parties' establishments, although they may be different, like we said before, and different policies and different sort of economic things that they want to do a little differently. At the end of the day, their ultimate goal is to siphon money, to run the military-industrial complex, to use media to propagate a narrative, and to gain power and maintain the status quo. And at the heart of all that, one of the best ways to do it is to install fear into others who feel like going against the status quo. And that fear that they're installing, they obviously just can't go up there and say fear for speaking out against the establishment, right? They can't do that. But what they can do is they can get all these micro little celebrity to like Cardi B, Like you have so many guys and females like Ariana Grande, even Leonardo DiCaprio. I'm not speaking on their position as like what they do, like their arts, their movies, their music, but they get all these little celebrities who are, I'm going to say it, very dumb when it comes to politics, politically dumb. You take a Cardi B who's shaking her ass on the camera, who's talking about her wet ass pussy all the time, and she knows nothing about politics. And then you involve her in politics, and somehow, some way, Cardi B has an interview with the president of the United States, but he won't go on Fox News. But he won't go on Tim Pool's show. He won't go on Joe Rogan. So you see why he's talking to Cardi B and not Joe Rogan and not Tim Pool. Cardi B's dumb. She doesn't know anything about politics, but she may not know anything about politics. She may be dumb. She may just be generally dumb. She has a following of over 50 million people.
Yeah, people listen to her. Like,
so people who are also dumb, but also young and dumb. So when you're young and dumb, you get a little more of a pass on this. Who listen to her, hear this prominent figure who makes this music because she is a culture icon, say, oh, Biden's really good and Trump's really evil, well, and all this BS, and be like, you should cancel people for thinking this way. Well, then boom, now you have Cardi B to do the job of the establishment. She's propagating cancel culture and propagating a narrative everywhere. And because dude, Cardi B if she was president, she would automatically have a higher approval rating than Biden. She's more popular than both presidents combined.
Yeah,
right now,
any celebrity I think could beat president because people look at celebrities like a whole different thing.
And this is something that I'm going to touch on, which Jordan Peterson's working on as well in his new book called "We Who Wrestle with God," and that's his new book. Most people don't know about it. He hasn't spoken a lot about it, but I watch and read a lot of his work. So, anyways, and the point is this thing that's happened with celebrities and politicians where the sacred or the non-sacred has become the sacred. And ever since this true sort of secularism has risen in America, and the famous quote from the Bible that says, render unto God what's God and render unto Caesar's what's Caesar's, which is basically simply probably one of the most powerful quotes in human history, because that quote is what propagated the sort of start of the separation of church and state, right? Do unto Caesar, do unto emperors and government as you do unto them, and render unto them differently than you render unto gods, making that biblical, but also cultural separation between the two, that one should be sacred and one should not be. So once this starts to become mixed with this, we start worshiping celebrities. We start worshiping AOC, and that's why you see in politics more so now than ever before. And if you can point to another time, feel free, but I don't think that's possible. Where people are worshiping politicians to the point where you could even say it's a cult.
Could I? I think we could point to ancient Rome in a different way, that they got people interested in bread and circuses, as they called it, and Colosseum games and this and that.
That's true. I agree with you.
But like really a person like this, but yeah, we've elevated celebrities to almost immutable people. Like if you look at India's caste system with the untouchables all the way up to royalty, they're almost this celebrity did, and then we even treat them like that. They mess up.
Yeah,
a good lawyer, you're off the hook. They say something wrong, well, it's just celebrity, said this, it's not a big deal. But if you say it, you're going to be in trouble. It's going to have,
But at the end of the day, back to what you were saying, this is why this thing with Aaron Rodgers is so good, and for everyone listening, is because Aaron Rodgers is a celebrity. He's a celebrity on the field. He's a celebrity off the field. He's a prominent football figure, and he is a prominent figure in the culture war, and his word holds dramatic weight with the people of not only Green Bay, but the people of the United States. American football is still, to this day, the most watched entertainment program on cable. So the fact that this guy's saying this, although ESPN probably won't cover it, you know how they're going to cover it. Same way CNN is. But the point is, he's still saying it. They're still going to see it because of how information gets out. The fact that he's saying this, whether you like him, whether you think he's a good quarterback or not, it holds more weight than even if some political people were to say it. The fact that he's speaking out against the status quo, the fact that he's acting in non-compliance. He's disobeying the NFL's orders. He didn't play last week, and you know what? They lost. They lost pretty damn bad. Yeah. They lost the game because they didn't have their star quarterback, because their star quarterback decided, well, and a lot of it was probably pressure. I don't think he got suspended, but the point is he didn't play because he didn't want to get the vaccine, and he at one point even sort of had to lie about it, right? Because again, I don't think I said this right away, but I know I said this talking to you, is like, you shouldn't have to lie about your own freedom of choice. Your own autonomy comes first. And if you have to say like, well, I did this just because you're afraid that your job will be persecuted because you did something simply out of your own autonomy as an individual who knows what's best for you, well, that is at the root of the core right there.
Yeah. Well, that's the worst thing ever, because my problem is, my issue is, if you're going to treat people two different ways and say these are the people who can do everything, they got this, they do this, they have these privileges, and then treat somebody a different way, you've created two classes of citizens. Nobody should ever have to apologize for, like you're saying, their own medical choices, their own bodily autonomy. If you have to apologize for that, something's wrong. You're not living in a free country. You don't have actual freedom. You have, as George Carlin would say, temporarily privileges. They're just temporary. Anyone can take them away. If you actually, the thing I'll disagree with him is, you actually do have rights. It's just the problem is people need to recognize you have bodily autonomy. No one can take that away. And I'm happy. Another thing too, Aaron Rodgers stuck to what he was saying, because a lot of celebrities, these Cardi B's and stuff, they flip-flop. They flip-flop with what's ever popular. Oh, universal health care is great. It's bad. This, that. Oh, what's happening at the border is horrible. You heard everybody on the left the last 4 years. The border, it's horrible. It's horrible. Look what they're doing. Camps, kids, all this. Did anything change? No. It's even gotten worse. What do they say? Nothing.
So how do we break this chain, right? This is what I'm working on in my book. And one person who did a good portion of this work, trying to think of his name. Anyways, trying to think of the name.
How do we break the chain of the left?
It was a book on intolerance. I'll find it in a second. I can't remember what it was, but the point of the book and what I'm going to be talking about is, how do you talk about impossible ideas? How do you talk about things that are almost impossible to speak about because of how controversial and how people are so stuck to their ideological sort of factions in those certain subjects? How do you begin to talk about it, right? How do you start the conversation in a way that it will actually begin without you just getting sworn at or yelled at or being called a Nazi or fascist? How do you start it? What's the best way to start it? And how do you continue the conversation to the point where you can open up a certain level of dialogue to the other person who is stuck? And it doesn't just mean leftists. It doesn't mean just people on the right. It means everyone. Someone who's so stuck into their ideological ways that they're a slave to their biases without even knowing that they're masters themselves. Right? They're not even aware that they have a master. They're not even aware that that ideology is their master, and they are simply a slave to it. Their master is so strong, so powerful, that it's able to control how they think, what they see, and how they speak, how they look at the world. Their perspective is being whipped by a master, and they are the slaves. So you have to look at it through that mentality. Not that these people are brainwashed. It's that these peoples are slaves to an ideology which has taken hold of multiple parts of their brain. So when you look at it like that, you begin to be more sort of empathetic. Not necessarily that you agree with it or that you love them, not compassionate necessarily, but understanding that these people have a severe disease, right? And one thing that's interesting about politics is that it triggers a large part of the brain's dopamine system, which, if you know anything about the dopamine system, is that anytime you use a substance that triggers a dopamine release, after you use that substance enough, your brain begins to then be depleted of dopamine. And that's when your brain calls for more dopamine, and that's how the physiological addiction sites. It's when your brain gets depleted of dopamine, and then you go into a physical withdrawal, which then causes you, I have to continue doing this. And the thing is that's not solely to substances, that's not solely to working out, right? So people can be addicted to their ideologies, which is one thing another thing that I'm doing some work on, right? Give me some time here. Not everything is all worked out, but the point is to try and say that, I'm just going to stop you from being a slave. How long did it take for us to free slaves? Like fully get rid of it. How long did it take to completely annihilate slavery in the West? How long? Millennia, right? Millennia.
About a millennia. Depending on your definition of slavery,
it's still going on in a lot of ways.
Because if you take, I'm going to be real careful here. If you take the race factor out of slavery, all slavery to me means is you do the work and somebody else takes a portion of it. That's essentially what was happening. Some of these working in the fields, they're taking 90% of it. So now they're like, that's terrible. Well, we want to build infrastructure. We want to have social programs. So we're going to take 35% you make and spend it on, they don't even spend it on that. It's not like you're like, well, I want to put it's not like Patreon. You're going, I want 10% roads, 15%.
Which I still think I fully like anyone, and I'm sorry that people probably don't want to hear this because it's difficult, but Patreon's a straight scam. And once you realize that it's not that difficult to make a website, you can get a website, a simple one, made for under $1,000, and you will get access to all your funds, right? I think the idea that these independent content creators who have the ability to create their own websites, not necessarily themselves, but pay a little bit of money to someone else who will, and then instead they go to Patreon because it's easier and they don't feel like doing that, even though it's not that difficult. And then they have to pay 10 to 15% of everything they make to this corporation. I'm totally against that, and I totally think people should stand up for full economic financial freedom, and that's how content creators get like Joe Rogan. Do you think Joe Rogan would have made it on CNN? Do you think Joe Rogan would have made it? Joe Rogan makes his money because he makes every dime, right? Like, ironically enough, he was on YouTube, and I'm not entirely sure how YouTube goes, but as far as I'm concerned, for a while there, all the money you got. They didn't take a single cut of it, right? I don't know if it's still like that. I think it is. I think it's pretty much the same thing. But you can't. Okay, you're already paying so much in taxes, right? How much of your salary, your wage, your income, your taxes, the money you make on your retirement fund, your stocks, even your crypto assets now, the money you haven't made yet, how much are you getting paid on the money you haven't even made yet? You add all that together, it's a percent of what you're getting, right, every year. Yeah. And then you add into that the fact that you're going to let a corporation take 10%. It's not good.
Here's what I'll say. Maybe this is a different take on it, a little bit different take on it. Patreon's kind of part of big tech. They're not like the same power level, I would say. But here's what I'd say it comes down to. If people don't want to do WordPress, if people don't want to build like a Timcast or a Luke Radowski thing and stuff, and they say, I don't want to do that. Well, there's Patreon, there's Subscribestar, and if you saw Dave Rubin, they put locals with Rumble.
Oh, that's right. Rumble did just buy out locals.
I'm going to put these videos on Rumble and Odyssey as well. Now, that being said, I think you can try out every one of them, see what results you get. Just like if you're freelancing, you can try this site, that site. If you're doing video programs, I tried a ton of them till I came here. And the one thing I'll say I did like on Patreon is with the Lauren Southern band, I'm not saying I agree with it. I don't.
Yes.
And the other bands, I think Dave Rubin actually had Jack Conte come on. And he came on for an interview, and he said he talked to him for like an hour or an hour and a half. however long it was. So you can find the episode. It's not super old, but if you know what I'm talking about, um, he actually did it like an actual interview. So I'm not saying I agree with Jack Conte's beliefs at all, or any of his things, or even his bands. But it was kind of nice to see a CEO of big tech. Like, you're not going to see the Twitter or the Facebook CEO come down and
Jack Dorsey did Joe Rogan twice though.
He did,
but he's not even. But the thing is, though, is with Jack Dorsey, he's not even CEO, and like he's like a scapegoat, really, if you look at it, because he hasn't really been CEO in a while. He at one point he was knocked off CEO, and he was just on the board. So it's like Jack Dorsey's like the perfect guy to prop up there. It's like, okay, we have all of these people in this corporation who are really doing the malevolence. Let's put this techie guy who was CEO, lost CEO, and goes from the board to not the board. Let's make him the scapegoat, because it's very easy to have one individual represent an entire, I would say, bureaucratic, subsidized corporation.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say about Dorsey. I think secretly Dorsey is a libertarian. Maybe he's flying one of these flags where I'm pointing. Maybe that's true. He did tweet out Anatomy of the State. He did tweet out some things that I think are interesting. And I actually feel Dorsey was Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs as in a verb, like they kicked him out of what he created and said, "You're gone. We're going to do what we want to do here." Unfortunately, I think he still has some left-wing views that are bad, but he's coming around. Even Jack Dorsey's coming around. And I know he did Rogan, but I feel like Jack Dorsey was almost, even though he was there, it's kind of like the situation where a lot of people who, oh, well, I'm the spokesperson for this, but I can't say this, do that. So he was held down. I do feel Jack Conte's maybe a little bit better. And the fact that I still think he runs Patreon from what I can see, because I know people use it. I have a couple creators on there and stuff. So what I'm going to say is take a look. I think the best thing is if you want to control your content, it comes down to you. Like if you're making courses online, a lot of people make money from that. The best thing is set up your WordPress, get plugins, and have your courses online and videos so you can make money kind of eternally, provided your hosting doesn't go down. But let's say you don't want to host it. You can do Udemy, Skillshare, and just know they're going to take a huge cut. Patreon's going to take a huge cut. Subscribestar is, and Locals and Rumble will have to take something. I don't know if they'll take as much as a cut, but Locals and Rumble will take something. And I'm not saying good or bad about any of these companies. Let's see where they go. I think Locals is going to be interesting. I made a Locals account as well. So I have everything but Subscribestar, basically.
Yeah, I don't have that. I don't have that myself.
You can also make T-shirts and stuff. So there's a ton of ways to do it. How do you break out of the spell, though? I say you make your own media. You make your own shows. Like if the news is bad, you make your own news show. If you don't like the people making your music that come out with crazy beliefs, figure out decentralized solutions to beat them. And last but not least, I think the universities have a big problem where they're teaching people crazy ideas and they're coming out like that. If we can find a way to say, hey, I don't think government should subsidize education whatsoever. And I bet you the landscape will change. I bet you things will change over, a decade or two. As fast as it got bad is as fast as it can get better. And that's kind of what we're seeing throughout everything. So speaking about that and a lot of things going on, I'm curious to kind of get your thoughts on, I know I talked about it, I touched on it. Since Virginia went a certain way that maybe some people didn't expect, a lot of people are saying with New Jersey, all votes have been counted fairly. Everything, has been working out. So Steve Sweeney did concede to Edward Durr, the truck driver, who spent $135 on his election. And he's just a dude, literally spent less than $200 and actually won an election. This is huge because if we want to create a yellow wave now, we don't have to have big mega donors. You don't have to call up Goldman Sachs to beat the guy. You just have to stand on the side of freedom and you can win. That being said, I think it's not in this article, but they're saying, well, the governor's race, though, Phil Murphy Phil Murphy won, the Democrat there. But I don't think his opponent is conceding. And basically, I'll just read this part. Murphy, who became a front runner in 2017, won the election after Sweeney declined to run for governor. Sweeney has had an incredible and incomparable career in history. He's been a partner in the vast majority of progress we made in the last 4 years, blah, blah, blah. One of his closest allies in the Senate, retiring Majority Leader Loretta Weinberg, kicked off a partial list of Sweeney's accomplishments under Republican and Democrat governors that includes bail reform, increasing the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and a paid family leave law. Now, I don't know exactly what to think about New Jersey. Did the Democrat actually win the election? Did he not? Because I'm seeing that some of the Senate seats definitely changed. So I'm interested to see what you think. But what I'm hearing out of New Jersey is Phil Murphy won. It's going to stay blue governor-wise, but they got a few more red senators.
Now,
Am I analyzing this correctly?
yes. Now, one thing I want to point out, right, because I like to point out the hypocrisy of the left, right, because it's just so frequent. But here's what I'll do with this, right? So, obviously, like you talked about with the Edward Durr and the Sweeney thing, is that up until just recently, this was 1 day ago, Sweeney refused to concede to Durr, claiming that there were still 12,000 votes left, right? And he did this knowing that they've already been counted, but, whatever, we let him do it. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm not saying I stand against it. But he held out, didn't concede right away. It took him, it was November 3rd, about a week to fully concede. Now, the same thing happened similar with Trump. I actually think it was like less than 7 days. It was like 5 days, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. But the point is that, he refused to concede, talking about 12,000 votes that just were not there and just holding out. My point is, though, is that when Republicans do this, they're going against our democracy. They're threatening our democracy by the refusal to concede, which is threatening the democracy because he's not allowing the process to quote unquote continue. But the whole point of this system, like if we have one, if there is a system, the system will regulate itself to the point where even if a candidate waits 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, that there should be the same amount of votes that there was before. There should be no discrepancies within a certain degree. Obviously, you're not perfect. Voter fraud exists. It definitely exists at a small level, right? But to the point that you can hold off as long, you're going to get, and everyone in the country, its citizens will believe that you are going to get an honest decision and an honest election based off of integrity, which is open and transparent. But when Democrats do it, there is literally nothing to be said about it, right? And I'm not saying it's bad. Like, I'm not saying what Trump did, waiting to kind of concede, and what Sweeney did. I'm not saying that's bad, but you see the kind of hypocrisy with that. But as you state, what is my opinion on the New Jersey election? Well, I think I'm not going to say there was no fraud, but I was telling a guy about this earlier, is that in Virginia, in the 2020 presidential election race, the Republican to Democrat poll watcher was 1 to 4. For every 4 Democratic poll watchers, there was 1 Republican. There was many disparities all around the board, right? So let's just say if there was fraud, there was a higher probability of it going through because there was such a lack of Republican and conservative poll watchers and workers in general. Now, in this election, it was actually more. So it was hovering around equal, 4 to 4, but even 5 to 4. And if you take a look, you can just Google it about, I think it was an MSNBC article about how Republican poll watchers are showing up to the polls, saying no more stealing of elections and talking about rigged elections. It's funny how they framed it, but basically they realized before in the last election that there was an absolute disparity, and in this election they showed up and they made sure if there was any tricky business going on that there would be equal amount of people to see it and to supervise it. And guess what happened? We won. I'm not saying that necessarily means election fraud happened, but what I'm saying is the same thing happened in New Jersey. There was an increase in poll watchers from Republican to Democrat. And what we did see is while the governor's race, obviously did not go red, it was so close, so close, so blew me away. I didn't think it was going to be that close, right?
I don't think so either.
Especially against this guy who's not like really a popular guy. I mean, it's not like he's not like some sort of like Trump figure. He's not even really like Youngkin. He's not like I can see why Youngkin won because of he fits a lot of boxes and he separated himself from Trump. But not God, I don't know how to say his name. He's an Italian guy, right?
Yeah, he's his name, and I can even pull up Jack Cia.
Yeah.
Ciatarelli.
Ciatarelli, right? So it's not like this guy was like that. Like he was not like a super Republican.
He's just like your regular, like
exactly, like a regular guy who's like no mandates, right? Just literally, you know what I mean? And the fact that it was this close, the fact that a trucker won with, like you said, less than $300 in campaign finances, the fact that the governor race was this close in such a blue section in New Jersey. Well, I actually will say that I absolutely, I would say I stand with the majority of all the sort of election results in Virginia and in New Jersey. And I'd say not to say that there's zero fraud, but I totally think that it was a lot better than the 2020 election. And I think a lot had to do with that of the Republican Party. Just even if they were wrong and they're thinking about there being fraud, they said, okay, we're going to increase people on the ground to make sure in case that there was fraud, not that there necessarily was, but just from the mentality of the Republican candidates, we're going to increase poll watchers and we're going to make sure nothing happens. So great to them. Great for finally fucking fighting back. Excuse my language. Great for not standing down and continue taking the boot from the Democratic Party. Right. Thank you. I mean, I was very happy in this race when I heard that because I got alerted by a city councilman. I met with him. This was a while ago, and we talked about the election results, right? And he knows some pretty top guys in Virginia. And he said that in the 2020 election that there was one of the largest disparities of poll watchers that he had ever seen in the state of Virginia. Like I said, that 1-4 number. And he said that it was very, like we talked about, the sort of chaos scenario where there's so much chaos going on, and you have one party who's not really doesn't have the numbers to really supervise what's going on during this chaos. You had the mask mandate, which was used as a pretext to kick people out, even if it was like right here, even if their mask was right here, they would say, oh, you're disobeying the mask mandate. And they could use that to kick, a certain political, certain faction out. And then they even blocked, and this is all like, I'm not saying stuff that are lies here. There's video evidence of both this, and there's video evidence of them covering up the windows in the vote counting centers. So this is all public. YouTube, you can see it, or Facebook, whatever this is going on. So I think that this time around, it showed us what's really going on politically. This is sort of a taste of 2020, 2022.
Yeah, we'll see.
I think this is more of an appetizer because I think in 2022, I think by that time Biden's approval rating will be probably at an aggregate of like 34.5%. Right now, Kamala's is at 27%. 27%. That's the aggregate. Biden's is like 38. The aggregate is 41. So right now, their poll numbers are their approval rating is very bad. The Democratic Party is in serious trouble. 2022 is going to be exciting, guys. And all we can hope for is that the Democratic Party just keeps doing what they're doing. That's all we need them to do. Like literally keep going with the mandates, keep going with the pro-tyranny, keep going with the stopping of parents from seeing their school board. It's what won Youngkin this race. He would not have won that race if that issue was not on the ballot. If that issue of education and school choice, more importantly, and teachers and people trying to stop parents from controlling what their kids learn to a certain degree. Like I get it. Teachers don't get to write the curriculum because they shouldn't. But if your child's learning about, let's just give an example, in New York City and California, they're showing children, and you can look this up. They're showing children pictures of gay porn and homosexual sex, and not just like sexual education pictures, but explicit pictures of penises and homosexual sort of content of weird nature. And they're talking to the children in a weird way, and all that stuff. And you talk about that. You're telling me you don't have a right to stop your kid from learning that and being in that kind of classroom. What about in LA when they're separating black and white students they're putting one group of white students and the other quarter separate from the black students. They're saying one of you is an oppressor and one of you is oppressed. One of you is the victim and one of you is not. And they're separating people into affinity groups. And they're saying that you're guilty for being white and you should be guilty for being white because your ancestors hurt this children's ancestors, which statistically is very improbable. Less than 30% of the African American population even come from slaves. Same thing with the white. There's a small population of white people who come from plantation owners. So the statistics aren't there to prove that, right? But point is, let's pretend that is true. Let's pretend one was ancestors of a plantation owner and the other a slave, right? We're in North Korea zone. In North Korea right now, the way that their caste system is set up, if your parents 266 years ago said that the Communist Party was not good, that they could literally say that, you then have a certain certain caste level, and that caste level does not change. It never changes. And the only way you can move up in the ranks in North Korea is by having a good ancestral past, right? If one of your people in your family have spoken bad about the Communist Party or the government in general, that means you're cursed. That's what they would say. That's what they say in North Korea. You're cursed, right? And you get nowhere. That means you're at the lowest ranks of that society. That's where you're eating the cockroaches. You're eating grass. You're killing grasshoppers. You're probably eating 2 to 3 times a week, right? That's the general population of North Korea, because the whole country is poor. More than 45% of the country is malnourished. The hospitals are so bad they reuse the same needles for multiple people. And Yeonmi Park has documented this. Michael Malice has documented this. We're getting to that zone when we start terrorizing people for what their ancestors have done. Like Hitler's evil, right? But if Hitler had a great granddaughter, would we persecute her? Would we? No, I wouldn't. I'd say, you know what? Someone in your family heritage a while back did evil, malevolent, atrocious things, but you have the possibility and the capability to be a good person. And I think we, as a culture, as a country, as a nation, as a civil society, the moment we start critiquing people for what the actions of their family members who they have no direct contact with ever, and even if they did, it doesn't matter. We judge people by their action, as Martin Luther King said, the content of their character, right? We judge them by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, not the actions of their ancestors, right?
Yeah, and I'll even say we don't even take precedent of people who do bad things now if they're the political class. Oh, George Bush destabilized the country, lied about it.
Yeah, multiple countries.
Yeah, nothing happens to that administration. Okay. Hillary, Obama destabilized a bunch of countries. Drone strikes, no problem. Trump ups the drone strikes, no problem. Biden messes up in Afghanistan.
Biden messes up everywhere. Like literally, he can't do one thing right. Like, I mean, like he's so good at being bad, it's almost scary. That's my quote for Biden.
I thought we built back better.
Well, that's the thing. And this is funny, what I didn't talk about on the stream yet. We talked a little bit about, I'm going to push this in real quick. Their Build Back Better plan, which is basically the Great Reset agenda hidden under a $1 billion, quote unquote, larger infrastructure package. I've read too much of the bill, literally too much. I'm scared to continue reading because there's so many micro absurdities that I'm scared to get to the major absurdities. But in one of those absurdities was a massive and unnecessary tax cut for the rich as part of their Build Back Better, and even Yahoo Entertainment, Yahoo Finance, which isn't generally on the left, but it's definitely not on the right, says that it's an absolute absurdity. They used the word absurdity, and it included a proposal to increase the cap on state and local deductions, and Congress must eliminate this deduction altogether. Taxpayer dollars should not be subsidizing the rich. So yeah, in their quote unquote bill that they're going to use to help infrastructure, they're also destroying certain bridges because historically they were used to quote unquote block off black people from getting in. So bridges are now racist. They have to get rid of all racist infrastructure, which are bridges, highways, road names, right? And then on top of that, they're also cutting taxes for the rich. So like these bills are not bills. Stop calling them bills. Stop calling them acts. They're agenda plans. And the only difference between this agenda plan and me just writing down something on a piece of paper is this agenda plan goes through the United States of America's Congressional Senate, and then it gets signed, Congress, and then gets signed by the United States President and goes into law. Only difference. They're all agenda plans. That's what they are. And they're the same way on the right. They're not any different on the right. They're simply economic and social agenda plans for each party to get through whatever their agenda is. They are not bills. They are not to help you. There is almost nothing in there that will help you. Nothing. Oh, well, what? The $600 that if you have $600 that the IRS can then therefore look at your account. Yeah, that's going to help you. Like, what in that bill is going to help you as an individual? Nothing. It's all to extend the power of the elites, extend the power of the wealthy, pay off their donors and special interest, and continue extending the amount of power that the government has. And it will be that way until one day we say enough with the agenda plans, enough with these ideological plans that have nothing in it to benefit America. They're trillions of dollars. What do you get even, like, how much money do you think you get off of those trillions of dollars? How much? You get negative, probably, ironically enough, negative $500,000. $500,000 is the average amount the average American pays of taxes in their lifetime, right? $500,000, that's what it's going for, to pay for these garbage, ludicrous ideological agenda plans. And you're getting your money's getting siphoned off. You're paying a cartel. Every moment you pay income taxes, every moment you pay taxes on money you don't have. I'm not even going to get into that.
Unrealized
capital gains. Every time you pay taxes, you're funding a cartel of criminals. And every time you fund a cartel of criminals, they then expand their criminal activity and behavior. Simply that, nothing else. And
it's exactly, in my opinion, how the mafia would work if you gave them legitimized, not legitimate power, but legitimate. Oh, they're not really the mafia. They're out to help us. They do all these crazy things because a lot of people aren't aware of it. Like, people started to be aware of pork bills when they started seeing it, last winter when Trump signed one. They're like, oh, this huge pork bill. And like, they do this all the time. They do this. This isn't a weird occurrence. This isn't like, oh, Washington's doing something weird. They do it all the time. And I think the enough will be enough when we get Genius by Birth said taxation is theft. Yes, when we come to the realization that taxation is theft, things should be funded voluntarily or by, there's a million different ways you could do them. Actually, speaking of Patreon, that's how I do taxes. Like, okay, how much do you want to give to this service? Like, oh, I want to give 10% in my local community. That's how I do it. But that being said, I think it'll end when people take a look and say, hey, Constitution is a great document. Let's try something different. What else do we have? Well, there's the Articles of Confederation. Let's take a look back at that. Since what we got now is not working, you got to pivot. You got to pivot and say, hey, I'm going to take a chance with this. I'm not even saying it would work out perfect. We'd have to see. But I think the Articles definitely, right now, in this point in time, is the best method of decentralization, which we did a show on that. Let's keep doing shows on that. But I'm going to go ahead and end it there because we are at an hour. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We had Genius by Birth. I like some of his comments. Did the Build Back Better with the sixes. Very cool. Not one tax dollar should go to one item that isn't transparent for those paying it, and taxation is theft. So, our libertarians watching out there. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed the topics we discussed, if you want to see the world in a better state, in a better place, if you don't want bureaucrats spending your money on trillion-dollar Build Back Better bills that don't build back better, then you can go to the lpmisescaucus.com. Our stance is simple. No more wars, no more lockdowns, no more bailouts, no more mandates. Get the state out of your life and leave you alone. Also, if you're interested in Daniel's content, he's done a lot of work on politics. Specifically, the highlights are the OSHA mandate and the election in Virginia. You can check that out. We've also done some podcasts. We also talked about psychopaths here, and he does a breakdown of that and some other interesting stuff. taking a look at the Charlie Kirk-Vosh debate, Bill Gates, and some of Tesla's work. So go check him out at Daniel B. That's Daniel, and then the letter B there. And then you can go ahead and click subscribe and check out all of his videos on the quantum effect. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank everybody who tuned in from YouTube and Facebook. This is Kareem with the Essential Libertarians, giving you the tools for self-governance. See you in the next video. Boop.